Hello, hello. Greetings, everybody. I hope you're having a good afternoon today. First of all, I want to thank Mom and Pop EA for allowing me to represent them and Respawn Entertainment today at GDC 2022 with my talk titled Sustained Animation Excellence in Apex Legends. So here's a brief overview of what I'm going to be covering today. I've divided this talk into about 4 or 5 parts. The first being an introduction, talking about, well, who am I and who is Apex, or what is Apex. The second one being animation, the Apex way, which is an overview of what defines our style and aesthetic on the team. The third being the 2 pillars, which is going to describe how we use animation in our game development. The fourth being the 3 keys, which will go over how we overcome the challenges of working on a live service game. And the fifth being closing words, which will be, well, what I'd like you to remember most about this talk today. So a quick summary of what this talk is it's a high-level summary of our collective experience and knowledge of the Apex animation team. And it's also a story of Apex told from the animation team's perspective. What it is not is a lecture on the 12 principles of animation or a tutorial on how to use the Euler filter to change everything. That's an animator joke. Now, once again, this is from the team's perspective. So without further ado, let's get introduced properly. So, who am I? Well, my name is Alejandro Potter, or Ali for short, and yes, well, no, that's not an actual photo of me, but I am a lifelong artist and animator with about 6 years of video game industry experience. I got my BFA in digital art and animation from the DigiPen Institute of Technology. After that, I went to High Moon Studios to work on Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2019, and Destiny 2 Forsaken. After that, Frontier Developments, where I worked on Jurassic World Evolution and Elite Dangerous Odyssey. And now finally, I am at Respawn Entertainment working on Apex Legends. And before we get into what Apex is now, we have to talk about where it came from. The origins of Apex can be traced back to Titanfall's to Respawn's first title, Titanfall #1, which came out in 2014. Now, if any of you have played the Titanfall games, you can see pretty clearly how the team at Respawn evolved the gameplay formula over time. And if we're being honest here, to me, I think Titanfall is one of the best shooters to come out in our generation. But that's just my opinion, of course. There was a really strong emphasis on giving the player ultimate freedom and a feeling of almost being like a superhero with how they approached combat with unique mechanics like the traversal, wall running, double jumping, slide hopping, grappling hooks, stims, phase shifts. You get the gist of it. And so after Titanfall 2, where they really punched up and polished the gameplay formula, they soon began work on Apex Legends, which is the latest title. And this is kind of how it started. The job was really simple. It was to create an all-new Battle Royale game that could exist in the Titanfall franchise, improve on the Titanfall gameplay formula, be unique among shooters in the same genre, fit 60 players on one map, be worked on in complete secrecy, have a flawless and calculated launch, have a skeleton crew for a development team, and be worked on and finished in about 1.5 years. And yes, these are actual photos of the devs. And yeah, you can see that, well, there were a few things that could have gone wrong. I'll open it up with a quote from Sean Wilson, our animation director, who describes it as, "The first year of development felt like building a house of cards in a hurricane." But fortunately for the team at Respawn, they already had a working formula, which was Titanfall 2. It provided a really good compass for the team on what would and wouldn't work in a battle royale. The movement system was already well polished and the gameplay was rock solid, responsive, and most importantly, it was fun. There was already an arsenal of wild weapons and cool character abilities and a multitude of multiplayer maps to choose from. So, what is Apex Legends? Well, I have a Wikipedia article here for you, but the too long didn't read version of it is, it's awesome, free-to-play multiplayer game. It has about 100 million plus players, launched in 2019. We have about 20 unique legends, 10 maps, 3 game modes, and a lot of new content. And our animation team actually started off at about 4 people, and now it has 18 spread across different locations. And the rest is history in the making. Now, on to the fun stuff. Animation the Apex way. What makes our style unique? First, let's handle the things that we do on the animation team, which is first and third person animation sets. You got your locomotion, your abilities, your weapon and specs. You got emotes, both ground and skydive. You have the gladiator cards, both static and animated. Gladiator cards are the little cool intros that you might have after you pick a character and it shows your whole team and stuff, but yeah. We also handle the lobby animations, in-game lore events, execution animations, character selections, and weapon/gameplay systems. And unfortunately, what we don't do are the animated shorts and trailers that you see. But we do have a really big hand in the creative process, and we get pretty involved in that. Now let's go over the overall aesthetic of the Apex games animation-wise. We aim to have a style that is focused on exaggerated realism, with 3 points being having strong posing, sharp timing, and subtle details. With strong posing, personally, I take inspiration from things like anime and comic book superheroes so that we can show distinct character silhouettes and use their posing to our advantage. And as for sharp timing, we have to remember that Apex is an action game, so having quicker and more a deliberate sense of timing helps sell the high energy. With subtle details, we also have to keep in mind that each legend is unique, so we try to inject as much personality as we can into their most visible animations. As for the feel, we always aim to try and get a creative, we try to create a responsive and engaging sense of gameplay. We go for something that's punchy, reactive, and satisfying. So for punchy, remember the timing is always going to be key in this aspect. We use quick and snappy and sharp movements to really emphasize key gameplay motions. And for reactivity, we try to give the player immediate feedback on their actions, for example, with weapons and melee and third-person locomotion or first-person. And as for satisfying, we add elements that help punctuate and embellish the player's accomplishments, like their executions or the ability to use ground emotes after doing something really cool. And to give you an example of the kind of aesthetic that we aim for, here's an animation that I did. But yeah, that's just a little something. Thank you. So I'll go over our process a little bit here. First, we have our first stage, which is exploration. This is where we start to gather our reference and sketch out our ideas. We brainstorm and kind of toss things between one another and do test shoots, test motion capture shoots, and pitch new concepts. And in stage 2, our blocking and testing phase, this is where we try to focus on the timing and the spacing and really trying to nail the storytelling poses. This is where we do our actual motion capture shoots, and if our animators choose to do so, they may have stepped keys, and this is where we also do most of our debugging. And we find out what works and what doesn't pretty quickly here. As for the third stage, where we go into timing lock, and once our timing is locked in, we hand it off to the other departments so that they can complete their work as well, like effects and audio. They really do rely heavily on us actually committing to a lot of the decisions that we make here. And for stage 4, shippable and polish, first we make it shippable, and then we make it spicy. We stick to our timing decisions, and we dedicate time to giving our work a spit, shine, polish pass. This is also where we address the major technical stuff like pops and visual jank, etc. And to kind of show you a little bit more of how we go about things here, in our workflow, we really have 2 main focuses. And The first one is to have a very clear idea of what we can execute on, and the second one is ensuring that the acting decisions that are being made are really strong from the get-go. This saves us a ton of heartache in the long run. This example is brought to you by Moy Para, who is a principal animator. Oh, he's the lead animator, actually, at Respawn. And this is how he approached the Watson character selection animation. And at Respawn, or at least on our team, we really do try to give our animators the ability to approach their work in whatever way they see fit. So, most importantly, we do try to remember one thing, and that is that gameplay is king, which brings me to the third part of this talk, which are the two pillars, how we use animation in our game development. Now, in my experience, our process for development doesn't really deviate too much from the industry standard, but it does help to keep it simple. At Respawn, there are two general rules of thumb that we follow, which we've called the two pillars. And here they are. The first one being enhance the design, and the second, well, make it badass. Now, pillar one, enhancing the design. This is where we try to explore, prototype, and test out as much as possible. In other words, we try to find the fun. This is where we really get to make sure that we're able to find the core design decisions that are still being made, figuring out what abilities we're going to roll with, what the personality and lore is going to be. This is where most new ideas tend to fail and fall flat as well, but that's actually part of the process. The important thing here is finding out what works. We use this time to get as wacky and as creative as possible and really discover what the key character performances are going to be. And then we prototype, and most importantly, we make sure that we test. So here's an example for you when we were working on Loba's tactical ability. If the video will play. Here we go. So as you know, that's not an actual in-game model. It's really just us trying to figure out what could look cool. And so once we found out that this is kind of fire and it works, we decided to throw it in game as quickly as possible. It's nothing too pretty, but it was functional. Example 2 would be the bow check bow. And when we were working on this one of the challenges was trying to figure out how exactly we can make a bow in a game filled with guns. This was the first time that we really tried to pull this off, so as you can see here, these aren't final models or animations or anything, but the important thing here was to just try and find out where the fun would be. How would we pose it out? What would it look like in ADS? How would it look like from Hipfire? So this is just a quick summary of what I've gone over so far. And now, for the fun part. I open this with a quote from June, who famously says, "Make it badass." And this is how we make it badass. Pillar number 2. So first of all, let's talk about what making it badass actually means to us on the team. It means that the animation does the following. It nails the overall feel, it uses solid mechanics, engages the audience, is clearly understood, has no distractions like pops, jank, etc. It enhances the core experience, and it accurately portrays the personality of the legend, and it also contains a motivated beginning and a satisfying conclusion. But above all, it really should be readable, responsive, and replayable. Now, if all of this can be achieved in a single animation, that's a major win, right? But what about with multiple animations? And this is where we get into one of the strategies that we employ on the team, which is creating a symphony of motion. I compare this to having an orchestra, right? Where you have your violins, you have your cello, you may have a harp, all these different instruments coming together to create something new and something grand. Now, with this, we have some animation sets that are divided into little animation slices that, when they're strung together, create a symphony of motion. Now, essentially, what we're doing is we're controlling the acting choices while the player controls how they're strung together. It really does help give the player a sense of feedback, and fun when it comes to the actions that they're doing. It does give design the ability to fine-tune each individual thing, and it conveys a really good amount of personality with a very limited amount of time. And it also does increase in immersion and engagement, and it ups the spice factor, and who doesn't like that? So do you remember those two examples that I showed you earlier with Loba? This is how it turns out here. So as you can see, this animation has a bunch of different smaller moving pieces, and as you can see, when they're strung together, they create something a little bit badass. Oh, you can clap, it's fine. Same thing with this. The Bocek bow, when it was finally done, we were able to add a few things to just make it a little bit more spicy, a little bit more reactive, and a little bit more fun. It's a far cry from where it came from, but with the small pieces, it came together nicely. So, when it all comes together, ultimately, this is the kind of result that you can expect. There should be sound on this one. The video? No, that's fine. It seems that it doesn't want to cooperate. It's actually playing the volume. Well, the important part's the animation. Shame you can't hear the music, it kind of bops. Yeah, it's playing. All right, here, I'll put it. And that's how we make it badass. Okay. Now, all that stuff is great and all, but it is a lot easier said than done. The truth of the matter is that when it comes to a game like Apex, these big projects, they come with even bigger problems. So how do we maintain it all? And that's what you're really here for, right? And with that, we're at the 3 C keys. How we overcome the challenges of working on a live service game. I love alliterations. So this is the 3 C keys of how we conquer creative challenges collectively, especially on a huge live service game like this. The 3 keys are 1, clarity, 2, constraints, and 3, communication. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on clarity because to me, I feel like this is one of the more important ones. They're all important, but this is a major key. And I'll open this up with a quote from Joe, who says, "If we can align, then we can fight about what will and won't work." Anyone who's worked in game development knows what he's talking about. One thing's definitely clear about Apex. The legends are a big deal. And thus, we have to make sure that we maintain character clarity. Now, the characters of Apex are all unique in their abilities, their appearances, and their personalities. And this is really what's at the core of what makes it unique among other FPS games in the same genre. From the from the very beginning, we're always trying to look for what makes these characters unique as far as their identity goes. What's their motivations? Why are they doing what they're doing? If we can answer these questions quickly, then we have a much better time. We put the care in characters. One thing that we realized on the team was that character personalities tended to beat out character roles. Each legend, like I said, is designed to be unique and interesting and iconic in their own right. So we try to use their distinct features and personalities to really enhance their performances. This in turn informs the player about who and what they are actually, what they are. Some key factors that we have to consider are, how is this character going to fit into the Titanfall universe? How would they interact with each other, if they do interact with each other? How would they resonate with the players? And how quickly can they be identified? Now, the real question ultimately became not would this character do it, it became how would this character do it? And that brings us to here. One thing that we realized on the team was that giving characters their own custom animations, like their own custom runs and sprints, walks, etc., really became a major stepping stone when developing the uniqueness of each legend, especially in the beginning. And here I have an example for you of Wattson, where we really try to take advantage of every opportunity to show the player the unique personality of each legend. The ability to easily identify them from a distance is also extremely beneficial from a gameplay point of view. And this is where we have to work as a unit in order to bring out the best in our legends. So when it comes to this, we have to collaborate pretty heavily with narrative and design and really good acting talent to get a true essence of what each legend is and who they are. We put a lot of our emphasis on getting genuine, entertaining, and convincing performances from them and staying true to the personality of them as well. And also with the help of effects and audio, we use that to emphasize their personalities and their abilities. And it's kind of like building a house. You have to work with a strong foundation. And to further illustrate this, I have a side-by-side example of how we approached Horizon's character select animation. Now, whether it's straight up mocap or it's really heavily modified mocap or somewhere in between, we don't lose sight of what's really important, which is getting a strong performance from the get-go. If we can achieve this with the end result, then we would consider it a success. The bottom line here is that our characters, our legends, they are our centerpiece, so we have to take care of them. And that wraps up the first key, which is clarity. And now, on to constraints. This is my favorite part. This is the section where I attempt to be a little bit more technical, so please bear with me because like low-level tech explanations aren't really my specialty. But to put it simply, there were some key constraints and limitations that we had to contend with, especially when it came to the early development of Apex. To give you some perspective, when Apex was first being developed, it was built off the back of Titanfall 2, which came with its own set of pros and cons. The great news is that many of the assets could be shared and used in the Battle Royale game. And there were already plenty of animations and models and effects to choose from, but that this lightning fast development did come at a price. And this is from one of our tech animators on the team, Cole O'Brien, who says, "Any battles with technical limitations must be picked very carefully. You would do well to heed this warning." Sacrifices had to be made. There were trade-offs. Now, because we built off the foundation that Titanfall had, we had to try and preserve the good gameplay of Titanfall while also making room for regular content releases over time. And with that, some concessions did have to be made. Some of them are, but not limited to, limited engine support, because what we are working on is actually a modified version, a heavily modified version of the source engine. We're constrained to previous design decisions. To illustrate that, I have two pictures here. To give you context, all of our legends share the same hand rigs as Jack Cooper from Titanfall 2. So no matter what their proportions are, they really have to fit one skeleton. And the bone placement, since it's rooted from the Titanfall days, it's really a challenge to make new stuff work. And it's not as easy reworking systems from the ground up with time constraints of live service games. So we also had to share and compress animations. We trimmed down our visual fidelity, and we did accumulate some tech debt over time, which is slowly but surely being paid off. And we also elected not to have animated dialogue in the game and have a looser art style. So one of the ways that we were able to kind of mitigate this was to develop better tools, better time. This is only going to get more important as Apex continues to grow. We're simplifying our workflow, which is still a work in progress, by adding shareable and modular rigs that build upon previous iterations. Now, this allows us to add new features as an addition to them instead of from scratch. And our rigs also didn't even have an IK spine in the beginning, which has been improving over time as well. Even now, we're slowly becoming more and more industry standard in terms of animation. So how do we keep it simple? One of the first methods is we use shareable and modular rigs. We don't use skin-specific animations. We use simple face rigs, which means that we have less face joints, which also means that one joint has to do more work. We have time-efficient tools that animators have at their disposal. And for our rigs, we have a higher emphasis on character differences. And we also have to remember, this is all because we have to fit 60 players on one map. And that about wraps up constraints, which brings me to the third and the final key, communication. In any relationship, especially working ones, communication is key. I'll open this up with a quote from Moy, who says, "The beautiful part is that not everyone agrees, and this encourages razor-sharp development. It could only come with friction, and friction comes from different ideas." This matters because strong communication in a game like this has to be considered because our team is growing, our game is growing. Not everyone's going to agree on ideas, and ideas happen fast, but that's a good thing. We work across multiple different locations. We have remote people, we have LA team, we have a Vancouver team. We work across multiple departments, which means that we're working closely with art, we're working closely with VFX, audio, and even code sometimes. And consistency is going to be essential in the long term, especially for a game like this. The bottom line here is that wherever we do move, we have to move together. Stop it. Get help. We don't create in a vacuum. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit that when I don't know how to do something, my first instinct is to try and find somebody who does know how to do it. This is also why I'm kind of terrible at bug fixing sometimes, but I'm learning, okay? That's what matters. Working on these characters is a process. A part of being on a team means that we aren't doing it alone. Now, there's a few things that help our efficiency in this regard, which is having access to people who know better, like I just said, consistent and actionable feedback. So, for example, we'll have times where we'll meet up, we'll have animation syncs, we'll get feedback from those, or we'll post our animations in Slack regularly and get feedback from that. And it's just this constant push and pull of ideas and trying to iterate upon them. We also make sure that we try to use strong documentation. That's still being worked on. And yeah, like I said, we have regular syncs and meetings. An example here would be the recreation of Ash. Now, if you recognize the first photo on the left, that is from Titanfall, and that's how she used to look. And we wanted to recreate her for Apex Legends, and that really only came about from getting a bunch of different ideas from a bunch of different people, figuring out what would and wouldn't work, and it went through a lot of different steps. But ultimately, we were able to come up with something that we thought was pretty dang decent. So here's some examples to further emphasize why communicating on something like this is so important. On the left, we have Mirage, he's animated using his goggles in this emote, right? And if you notice, there are no goggles that he's animating, so he's just miming them out. Now, we should have considered how important the goggles were for his future skins. And same thing with Wraith on the right side. While shoulder pads are awesome, there is this animation where she raises her hand up or a little too high and it causes some clipping. So what we learned from this is that it's important to set hard and fast rules for what the limitations and the must-have should be for each new character look so that they can get along with existing content. This is where character Bibles are especially important and helpful for this kind of thing. So when final design decisions are being made, it's important for all of us to stick to it. And that wraps up communication. If you can use all of these 3 keys, the doors of possibility opens. And with that, I have my closing words. The bottom line here is that working on a live service game is not easy. So what helps? Focusing on the fundamentals. Remember who you are. At the end of the day, you're working on a game, and games are supposed to be fun. Stay true to the core experience, to the core of what you want your audience to experience, and that'll go a long way. Enhance the gameplay where it matters most. Stay true to initial development decisions. Use clarity, constraints, and communication, the 3 keys. Create opportunities for feedback and iteration, and take chances, make mistakes, get messy. Shout out to Magic School Bus. And lastly, stay balanced, stay inspired. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. One key aspect of working on a live service game like this is that it's a long-term commitment. And this means that the work never really stops. It's like training a muscle. Most of the actual growth is being done in the recovery and resting phase. There is value in stepping away from the grind. So do what you like to do outside of work. Allow yourself to be inspired by new and fun ideas, and then come back with a fresh and renewed perspective. We do all these things in the hope that we can achieve a positive work-life balance. And lastly, I'll end it with a quote from Sean Wilson, our animation director. The goal was never to get 100 million players. The goal was simply to create things that would impress and amaze our peers. And with that being said, the fact is that sustained animation excellence is not achieved with excellent animations alone. It is achieved with excellent teamwork. Thank you. And lastly, if you want to join us, we're looking for character animators or tech artists, all levels. Hit up www.respawn.com/careers and reach out to Sean Wilson or John Main, our animation directors, and we'll get to you. Thank you.